Got it. As a preliminary matter, this is Brian Sullivan, Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Dave Iverson.
Here.
Penny Dye.
Here.
Chantal Murphy. Here. Meg Browers.
Here.
Brooke Moore.
Here.
And Rima Sherry.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tucker Holland.
Here.
Anticipated speakers, we'll pass that for now. Good afternoon. This is an open meeting. The Affordable Housing Trust is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust is convening via video conference via the Zoom app is posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join for Zoom meetings. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless we note otherwise. We'll turn to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, we'll go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you're not speaking. Remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any responses, please wait until the floor is yielded to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by speaking through the chair. Finally, each vote will be taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call. With that, let's move to the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the following modification. Item 6, the CCAP applications, that we push that off till the Tuesday meeting, May 30th.
Except for the subordination, yeah.
Except for the subordination. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Just for discussion, I see one of the applicants has logged on here. I don't know if it says connecting to audio. I don't know if that's an issue for the applicant or not.
Corey, can you hear us?
Looks like it's been cycling, connecting to audio for a while. I don't have the application in front of me. Does anybody know the date that it's been closing? It's as long as it's not next Tuesday.
No, well, there's no change in when the monies would go, whether we were taking them up today or on Tuesday. The next one is June 7th. And Tori and I have been in communication in the last day or two. So I think the timing is all good. As far as I know, the timing is all good for all of the applications.
Okay. So with that, the Penny's motion to move this item and seconded by roll call, Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Penny Dye.
Aye.
Chantal Murphy.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Rima Sherry.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan's an aye. Okay. Item number 3. Tucker, I don't know. We'll wait. The update up for Ken Bogran and the housing office manager position.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to let the trust members know. I know a number of you have been asking about Ken. I had the opportunity to speak to him last week, which was terrific. And you know, he sounded, you know, strong and positive, and he is you know, going through some rehabilitation, strengthening for the next week or two. And then they're going to evaluate his return back to the island. So I know, I've conveyed we're all, sending good vibes, and I just wanted to let people know that we're all thinking about Ken, and he seems to be doing well, which is terrific. And
Penny has a question or comment on that.
Tucker, do you have an address where he is that you could circulate?
I will try to get hold of one, Penny. I don't have one on here.
Thank you.
Yep.
My office is asking.
He's
Yep.
He's at the Spalding Rehab in Sandwich. I don't have the
Yeah,
exact.
oh, he's in I got that. Never mind. Thank you.
Okay, yeah,
Thanks, Vicky.
you're welcome.
Thank you for sharing that, Tucker. Vicky. Tucker, on the real estate office managed position.
Yes, so that, we still have not filled that position. I just wanted to make trust members and the public in general aware. We have had a couple of off-island applicants that were trying to see, how that might work. But we still have not filled this. So
Still looking. We know
Still
anybody?
looking. Yep.
Send them to HR.
Please do.
All right. Number 4, previous minutes. This item will be taken up on the June 13th meeting. Any questions or statements on that? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to item number 5, public comment. Any members of the public want to make comment? Any members of the board as a member of the public want to make comment? As a member of the public, I'll make a comment that I'm really thrilled about the ballot turnout and the support of the community.
That's
on
an
the
agenda
override.
item, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, I'll hold. Well, so I'll talk about that as a board member later, but as a member of the public, I'm very excited. So leaving that one alone, we'll move down to a discussion about Article 18 and ballot measure 6. So Tucker, go ahead. I just need a soft opening.
Well, any comments?
No,
Well, so obviously, I think you all are aware, we received, very strong support at town meeting for Article 18, thanks to a number of compelling speakers at town meeting, particularly might take the opportunity to recognize Esmeralda, Katie, Lorna, and Berta, who did not show up planning to speak that day, but felt compelled and just did a tremendous job. And as you all know, on Tuesday, the ballot measure 6 passed, not by quite the same margin as town meeting, but it passed nonetheless. And so that is a really significant milestone with regard to reliable and material ongoing source of funding.
Tucker, I'm going to come to Penny, and then
Yeah,
Brooke.
it passed by only 102 votes. It was the smallest margin, I think, of any of the overrides.
It was more than the playing fields, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm wondering if anybody has, Arthur had said he was gonna. He said at town meeting, if it failed at the ballot, he would bring Article 35 forward in November. Does anybody know whether that means he's not doing that conclusively? How about this? How about I'll find out and report back. Okay.
Thank you, Penny.
Yep.
Come to Brooke.
So I want to thank Ann Cuspa and Elizabeth, who are here for their social media outreach on the ballot question. That was one of the items that came out as a strategy from the Housing Summit. And I was delighted personally to see your posts and encouragement to get out the vote. So thanks to both of you.
For sure.
Come to Meg.
I just wanted to go on the record and say how much I was grateful for everyone who stood up in support of the articles at town meeting with their stories and their testimonials. And I wanted to also recognize and to everyone who came out to vote. And I also just wanted to recognize the repeated comments about lack of transparency with the trust. And I guess I wanted to put into the record that there's a wealth of information available on our website, and we meet bi-weekly right now. So I think if the message from the community to us, whether it's a minority or a majority of the community, that we're not communicating our message, like, we can take that into consideration and try to do a better job to spread the word. But I also think the town could maybe support us by adding to Libby's monthly newsletter or something else, just reiterating what kind of information we do have to share and what the work plan is, because I'm super grateful and honored to serve on this committee. And Tucker, I know you're doing such good work and we're making a difference, and we're working with Anne, and people are getting housed, even though it's an uphill climb. So maybe we can just spread the word more, be more visible, just have the town's support in pushing that messaging forward, so that if there isn't any kind of a question about things in the future, or when we look to next year's town meeting, we can have a leg up on this communication plan. But again, thank you to everyone who voted.
Thank you, Meg. I think that those are thoughtful comments. Shanta?
I want to piggyback off of what Meg said in communicating to the general public, and just for those of the trust who don't know, and remind Tucker that we do have access to the Chamber's newsletter as a part of our renewed MOU with them, where you can use monthly, quarterly, weekly if you need to. You can do dedicated e-blasts to their membership. They have about 14,000 people on their list that you can share messaging with. So connect with Florencia. I did let her know. So please feel free to connect with Florencia and use that, because we're certainly not using it as a town nearly as much as I would like to see.
That's an awesome outlet. Thank you. Tucker?
Yeah, thank you, Shanta. That's definitely good to know. So we had talked a little bit about running some advertising before town meeting, and there were some time constraints, as well as process constraints, like with working within the town sometimes. So I think as some folks know, Brian and I ended up putting a letter or two into the Current, which helped to maybe provide some transparency to folks who hadn't seen the FinCom review of the article, or our own review here at our meeting. But in any event, I think that with a little bit of time now, that it may well be worth putting something together to run this summer, perhaps in both the Current and the INM, and other locations could be distributed through the Chamber e-blast and so forth. But that really, paints the whole picture for both year-round and seasonal residents alike. And, to do something like that in July, for example, I think would be very beneficial.
Penny?
Yeah, so question for you to Tucker. How often are we doing the newsletter?
It's a quarterly newsletter.
Quarterly?
Yeah.
Why can't we just distribute that through the Chamber?
We could.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we can only put the information out there. We can certainly, I think, do a better job at putting it out there. It's hard to sort of make people read it. But
I think there's an opportunity for a lot of outlets, and I think if any of the communication subcommittee wanted to kind of highlight a topic every couple of weeks, that there are opportunities for distribution outlets. And I see Anne's hand up, and I can't wait to recognize Anne and see what her thought is.
Oh, well, thank you. There's a housing production plan, and I think that gets lost. Like that has to lead every answer to this. And people, yeah, it's a whatever 80-page document. I don't know how many pages, but there's a plan, and then it's about putting that plan in action. So I think it always needs to come back to the housing production plan.
Thank you, Anne. Brooke?
So a process is an important piece of this because, town administration has moved to centralize management of communications across the town. And that means everything sort of funnels down through the communications department. And I think that that's a good thing from my perspective. And it means we have to be way farther ahead of the curve time-wise to allow our messaging to go through that approval process to make sure it's consistent with, communications across the town. So I think we need to be more anticipatory of our communication needs in order to fit within that new system, which is new and still settling in. So I think that's a reality. We are not, as a town board, we have to go through communications, and there's a good reason for alignment and consistency in communication. And it just makes things a little more challenging. So we got to think ahead a little bit more.
Penny?
yeah, does it make sense? It may make sense to have the communications committee meet and lay out, sort of chart out the year based around major events that we know are coming. And just lay out a template of what we hope to accomplish.
That's a great idea. And maybe just with that template, we can send it over to the communications department, understand how much lead time they need on each one, work backwards from there. I think the only other item related to coming back to ballot 6, Tucker, you were going to reach out to the finance department to schedule an appointment so we could get a better understanding of how the override funds will work. So at a future meeting, Tucker and I will come back and report so everybody has an understanding of what that looks like and opportunities for spending there are.
Yeah.
If anybody
I've sent Brian Turbot a note on that topic.
if anybody has any specific questions you'd like us to bring to that conversation, please email them over to Tucker. And so we'll be ready for that and come back and report later. Any more on the election in the ballot, or not the election, town meeting in the ballot? Seeing none, we'll close that item and move to item number 8, the discussion year-round restriction advisory committee. So I asked Tucker to put this on the agenda. We've been having a lot of talk about the creation of a year-round restriction, whether it's an income, what does year-round mean, definitions, etc. We as a group had incredible success working with the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee and setting up a group of island residents. And this goes back to some of the feedback at the meeting and prior to about transparency. So for the creation of a deed restriction program, my thought was, why don't we seek back to the community and look to appoint a number of community members. I don't know what the number is, 7, 9, 12, 11. That's what this discussion is for. And work to set a timeline and bring in a moderator to work with them and put forth some recommendations on what as a community do we want as deed restrictions and to implement the funding and source of that. So we as a group have kicked around ideas. We've kind of got stuck in some of the details of it before. And so my hope is that with Vicky's experience in some other communities in the state and setting up home rule petitions, kind of understanding a level of what's happening at the State House with Julian Sears' article, and then what are our needs for a community, this would be the best venue to develop that. So that's why I had this on the agenda. Penny?
Yeah, as a former member of the Neighborhood First Committee, I thought one of the most effective things about that was that we had a very clearly defined task, and it had a relatively short deadline. I mean, a reasonably short, it was reasonable, but we had to work and meet frequently. The second thing I thought was effective was that we had people from a vast variety of backgrounds, including owners, renters, summer residents, year-round folks. So I just think we should try and make this as broad as we can in that regard.
What was the size of the group?
I think we were,
Do you remember?
I think we were 9. And then we had some ex officio. I know, Tucker, you were at every meeting. But we had a couple of, I think there were 2 of us from the trust. I don't know. Dave, were you on there? You're muted.
He said yes, he was. I read his lips, so. Brooke?
So the warrant for special town meeting will be, the schedule is that the warrant will be adopted on August 16th. So, you know, working back from that timeline, the short-term rental work group is scheduled to review their articles with the select board on July 19th and send them to us the week before that. So if what we were doing required any home rule petition or town meeting approval, and we wanted to move this forward quickly, which I would totally support, I think I'd be in favor of a pretty aggressive timeline for this work. I don't think it's going to be that complicated. I think we're not reinventing the wheel. There's stuff that exists out there that could just be tweaked for Nantucket.
Mm-hmm.
And I would suggest that perhaps we might want to invite a subject matter expert like Judy Barrett to guide the group on a contract basis and really set a pretty aggressive timeline of regular meetings, and I think it can be done pretty quickly.
Brooke, I'm sorry, you said July 19th?
Yes, sir. July 12th
1, 2,
is when we first review
1,
the warrant,
2,
the town sponsored warrant
3,
article.
4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 weeks. Penny?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I just think it's so important to do this thoroughly. And I appreciate Brooke's comments, but I would be really surprised if it could be done thoroughly. I mean, it's going to take us a couple of weeks to form the group.
Right, to find a broad group of
Nonetheless,
people.
the work should commence for sure.
So, while I would like to make the timeline you outlined, Brooke, I tend to agree with Penny on that. I want to come to Vicky in this the question related to, do we need a home rule petition? Could some aspects be done or utilized before a home rule petition? I guess what are the legal needs that to start operating a deed restriction program?
So I would probably say, and without going into committing myself, because I really would want to look at any other options that might be available, but I think that the home rule petition is really the way that you may want to go. If you want to create something that's like a program, like you have, however, with the need, the covenant program or things like that, I believe those were created as, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were just created as town meeting articles and not as home rule petitions. And I'd want to double check that, but if that's the case, then perhaps we could think of getting it ready as an article and take a look at what we've done previously with these other programs and try to craft something that we could use for an article. It would still need to be approved by the Attorney General, but that's less time, I think, because the only reason they wouldn't approve it is if it was deemed to be unconstitutional, the Massachusetts Constitution. So I would think that we could get that done quicker. But I would want to go back and double check and just make sure. And I think a lot depends too on perhaps where your funding is going to come from. Is it just going to come from trust funds, or do we have to rely on appropriations? I'm happy to go back and also take a look at what I've crafted for other communities that we've submitted home rule petitions for. I've been involved with a couple of other municipalities, and those bills, I believe, are up there. So I can look at those as well, and I can come back to your next meeting with further information if you want, or even just email. I can even just email you and let you know what I find.
Vicki, you said that those were bills I'm assuming up at the State House. So those
Mhm.
communities voted to move them forward?
I believe so, but again, I'm going to double check. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I did draft them and they were drafted as home rule petitions. So I just want to make sure that when I think they were going to go to town meeting. My understanding was that they did pass, but I'll follow up for you.
Great, thank you. That would be helpful.
Okay.
Meg, you had your hand up and I saw it go down, but
I was just gonna comment that 7 weeks is very aggressive, but could we just see how far we get? I mean, I think probably a big part of it will be establishing the committee and making sure we have all of that inclusivity and buy-in from the community. And then the conversation itself could, in theory, be relatively straightforward. So maybe not like a lofty goal of trying to meet that deadline, but total understanding if we don't.
okay. I think that's fair. Tucker?
Yeah, I just was going to enumerate the advisory committee members for Neighborhood First. We actually had 11 members. Doug Abbey and Peter Hoey were the co-chairs. Posey Constable, Penny Dye, Howard Dickler, Christy Ferrantella, Dave Iverson, Brooke Moore, Eric Sabetsky, Brian Turbot, and Joe Grouse.
Penny?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the way it was initially set up, Tucker, you can confirm this, was that we were representing different entities. I think I was on there for the Housing Authority.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
Yeah, but I don't know that we need to stick with such a prescribed structure going forward. I don't know, maybe not.
And Tucker, do you or Penny have the timeline that process went or took?
Tucker would have it.
I think that, the monies were obviously approved at that year's town meeting. I think the committee was formed at some point, like during that summer, and that the work was concluded by that December.
Yeah, I think my recollection is we started early fall and met a lot.
Yeah.
And then we're done by December. Yeah.
Brooke?
I would say that the scope of what this group is going to be doing is quite a bit narrower than Neighborhood First. Neighborhood First had a much broader mandate and series of things that had to be answered. Then I think this is a really direct, very specific thing that we're asking to be defined. So I believe it can be done more quickly. And I agree with Meg that let's shoot for the moon and with the realistic understanding that it may not happen. And then Vicky, the other question was, I know that there's, because of Julian's legislation on year-round restrictions, that a number of communities are sending up home rule petitions on the year-round restriction without income limit as home rules. And there is some common language being shared among other communities that have done this, Provincetown in particular, and we might be able to, and
I wrote
the idea,
Provincetowns.
yeah. Oh, yeah, there we go. So the idea was that we send up consistent language so that it's easier for the legislature to understand what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so I did write Provincetown's home rule petition. So I'm happy to share with you, what it looked like, and yeah, they did not have income restrictions, and so there are different ways of doing it. It's really, like you say, going to be a matter too of how the town wants to adopt it and what they're looking for. So.
So if I work backwards from thinking about a member of the public who may be interested in participating in this, they're going to want to understand timeline and commitment to the process. So do we, put it out there that it's no less than 4 meetings on a every 2-week basis to begin? Is a month long enough for us to find 11 community members, or is 2 weeks enough time for us to find 11 community members? I don't know what's realistic.
Do we need 11? Could it be 7 or 9?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm thinking 7.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. And are there any requirements like of types of positions or offices that we want to look for? Like, I think that there was member of the trust, there was a planning board member on the past one, there were other positions. Rima?
Member of the chamber would be good, to represent businesses, I think. And,
Yep. Oh, sorry, Rima.
oh, and, housing people like Miss Ann down there.
Brooke?
So we're, at the select board level, we're looking at these, how to appoint working groups and who to assign. And sometimes there's a strong reason to have designated people. And other times it's good to just open it up and have it be all at-large seats. And then when we look at who applies, then we can pick and choose among the applicants to represent the different, we can advertise that we're looking for people for different constituencies, but I'm afraid if we assign a seat to a chamber member and nobody applies, then we've hamstrung ourselves. So I'd be more inclined to say, these are the types of constituents we'd like represented, and just make it all at large seats. And then we can discuss as when the applications come in. So, and I would be inclined to establish a number of seats and have them all at large today, and then start advertising, give Tucker authorization to advertise as soon as we can do it.
Shanta?
I agree with Brooke on that, just because I'm thinking about I'm trying to choose my words wisely, but if we're looking at a representative from the chamber, from the housing authority, from this trust, I worry about how diverse that group will be and if it will be reflective of our year-round community. So I think if it's an at-large, if they're at-large positions, we might get some folks who aren't necessarily sitting on these boards and trusts that have interest in this conversation.
Great, thank you. Tucker, then Penny.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think we just want to be conscious when we're forming the board of there may be representatives of other boards who can contribute greatly to what we're trying to achieve here and, you know, represent kind of a broad constituency. Someone had already written me following the select board ZBA meeting the other day, Lisa Botticelli, who is, I think, on the call today, wanting to know more about this and potentially having an interest in serving. And so I just think there's some, we want to be thoughtful about having as broad a representation as we can on this. And you know, fewer sometimes can be better, you know, in terms of moving things along when it comes to a committee or board. But I do think this is an important topic to have broad representation on. So I think the Neighborhood First Committee was a larger committee, if you will, at 11 members, but I think they worked very well together. And I would hope that we could achieve something like that again.
And Penny? Thank you,
Yeah,
Tucker.
just two or maybe three quick things. One reason that worked so well was we had very strong leadership. And they were going, no matter what, to stick to the time and task at hand. We've tried often in the past to have a diversity of experience, let's say, on some of these subcommittees, including people that are living in affordable or subsidized housing. And it's been a challenge to get people to have the time to serve effectively. I would like to see not all at-large seats, but certainly a significant portion of at-large seats. But I think we need some expertise from the affordable housing arena. And then lastly, before anything goes public, I think this board should vote on the scope of services and the definitions. And we're meeting seemingly weekly now, so that shouldn't be an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Go ahead, Brooke.
So I'm sort of leaning toward 9 now, and I'm leaning toward having one member of this board, maybe a member of ZBA. I don't know, Dave, do you think planning needs to be represented and then the remainder at large, or, you know, where else?
I'm not sure that, I mean, we're going to have a representative from the trust. I'm not sure that planning needs a seat. It depends on what the diversity of the group is. I would rather see a more diverse group than a planning member, but I could be convinced off of that. I don't know. I don't have a real strong feeling either way, to be honest.
You're good, Dave?
I'm good, yeah.
Okay, Brooke to respond and then to Penny.
Yeah, through you to Dave. My thought was, you know, you guys are looking at applications like Sparks Ave and how deed restrictions, different types of deed restrictions play in that it might be helpful to have your perspective. That was kind of where I was coming from.
I think,
or we could just invite you, someone from planning, to come speak to the group at some point too. That's another option.
that's a good call. I mean, I think planning definitely has can add some value to the discussion. I mean, my only drawback is I just want to make sure that we have a really good broad base in this group. But that's, I guess, up to the rest of the board, and I think that we can add value for sure.
Penny, Meg, Tucker.
So quickly, just Brian, through you to Brooke. I'm just curious why the ZBA. Is it because of the recent issues surrounding Surfside Crossing?
May I respond?
Please.
Yeah, I think because I see this as a separate thing from what's happening with Surfside Crossing, but I want to make sure there's good communication and overlap, because what we offer as a program may impact the ability of purchasers to buy units and have them deed restricted at Surfside Crossing. So it feels like they're separate things, and then there's some crossover, and just, you know, for the communication back toward the ZBA as well. Maybe not necessary, or maybe, you know, if Lisa's interested, she could apply as an at-large. I'm open to either way.
Thank you.
Meg?
I would really, really like us to push hard and make sure that this committee, it does include all demographics and representation from all the different kinds of people on the island, including people who speak Spanish, maybe someone who speaks Portuguese, you know, people of color, renters. I was looking at our board right now and just thinking how our board doesn't have a renter, unless I'm mistaken. You know, we don't have a Spanish speaking person on our board, and those are such huge demographics in the community. And I feel like for me, who we're serving, if we think about the year-round workforce, it's just really critical and important that we hear those voices loud and clear.
Thank you, Meg. I'm going to come to Tucker and then Penny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, just to the extent it's helpful to, you know, to go back to the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee, you, of the 11 members that were on that, I believe that 7 of them were sort of representing different organizations or, you know, housing advocacy generally. And then there were 4, call it open at-large seats. We don't have to have the same makeup of folks, but just for whatever that's worth. The one thing that we haven't talked about yet, or I haven't heard mentioned yet anyway, that we did have on that committee, of course, was a representative from the Finance Committee, and that may be relevant here also.
Thank you, Tucker. Dave?
Back to what Meg was saying and what I kind of started to say, I don't think that this board should be packed with board members. I think we need to really get as many at-large seats as we can, and the group could always call in a planning board member, or I mean, I think a FinCom member is a very good choice to be on the board, but I think the other members' boards could be, the board could ask them in, or the group could ask them in for their perspective and not necessarily sit on the board. So, I mean, I really want to get a broad slice of Nantucket in here and not pack it with a bunch of us board members.
So if I may kind of bring it back to a higher level, I'm hearing broad support for the creation of the advisory group. I think we're questioning the number of people and where the people are coming from, the scope of work and the timeline. If I can suggest to the group that Tucker works over the course of the next few days, we bring this back on Tuesday, keep the item open, have a kind of a working document that we can vote on what the scope of work is. We can see if there's a contract provider that could help lead the group and what their timeline would be between now and our next meeting. So then come the next meeting, we'll be able to vote to advertise kind of the scope of work, the timeline, and the number of seats to see what sort of response we have. Brooke?
Vicki, could we establish a working group that is between 9 and 11 members, pending who applies? So that we don't, if we don't, you know, can we keep it flexible in that way, or do we have to set the number?
Well, I think it would be helpful to set the number, then you can allocate, you know, X number of seats to at large and specific. So I think it would be helpful to have a set number. Yes.
Go ahead, Tucker.
Sorry, just practically, this cannot be on Tuesday's agenda. We're beyond the time for it to be posted to be an item.
We can't just leave it open. Go ahead, Brooke. Brooke.
Then I would be prepared to make a motion to establish the work group to get this going, pending the details of the scope. But let's make it official today so that And to authorize Tucker to engage a subject matter expert to facilitate. And I think we take a stab at a number, see what we agree on. We're going to have to decide it today or Tuesday. So I don't know what's going to change.
Okay, so I love your thought process. I think that maybe a moment more discussion because I've got two hands up. I'm not sure I'm clear on what your motion was. So Penny,
Well, I was going to suggest, why could this not be continued until Tuesday, Tucker?
that was my thought. We don't close the item, we just leave it open.
Does that work,
And-
Vicky, procedurally?
So Vicky, that question's to you. Procedurally, can we just leave this item open and take it back up again on Tuesday without it being posted on the agenda? Or do we need to?
Revise the agenda?
But we don't have enough time to do that.
To make a
Have
revision?
a
Okay.
holiday Monday?
Yeah. So I think that if you want to make it, I mean, if you want to make a suggestion to, make a motion today and just it can be a little bit more vague, subject to, the scope being
Finalized.
tuned, yeah, and finalized. So that way, in the event that you end up needing another motion, you can always go back and do that. But at least you have something ready that you can at least start working with. I think that accomplishes your goal better, and that way you don't run into the problems of having to post and, have another meeting and.
Okay, great. Meg, to you, and then I'm going to come back to you, Brooke, to work on your motion. Meg?
Brian, if this is procedurally not the best way to go about it, just stop me, but would the scope not be relatively simple in that we're defining a year-round residence? I mean, it's really,
More than that.
So it'd be a year-round deed restriction
well, yeah,
is what the scope would be, the high-level scope, so.
okay. So the
Penny?
full restriction program,
Yeah,
not
it's-
just what would define someone as year, or, an opportunity as year-round.
That would be a subsection in the definition, in the entirety of it. That's one thing to tackle. The definition of residency is
Yeah.
one thing to tackle within the whole scope of a future program deed restriction.
It would be designing the program, figuring out who holds the restrictions, who enforces the restrictions, right?
Mhm,
And who pays for the restrictions.
Right. Most importantly, the funding. Oh, I'm sorry.
With that, I'll come to you, Brooke.
So I'd love to get a sense of, before I make a motion, we talking 9 or 11?
Personally, I'm at 11 based on the conversation of the broadest group, and I think there's an opportunity for people with experience and people without experience, that will all have valuable input. That's personally where I am.
Okay, so I move we establish a deed restriction working group of 11 members. The designated seats to be determined at a future meeting, and the scope to be refined, but to generally include the creation of a deed restriction program for Nantucket that might include a year-round deed restriction program that might include one or more deed restriction definitions. And to authorize Tucker to engage a subject matter expert to guide the group. And I think we should add to my motion a date at which we will refine this. And that's really what's the next one after next Tuesday?
13.
Okay. Go ahead, Penny.
Yeah,
Let me take a second and then get for discussion. Is there a second?
I was going to second and then make a suggestion to add to it.
ahead.
Brooke, here, the intention is for ownership and tenancy, right?
Sure.
I
For
would just,
homeownership and rentals. Yeah,
as a friendly amendment, I would add that, if acceptable.
okay. Yep.
Okay, the only thing that I'm not clear on is the timeline to reconvene or to. Do you want Tucker to advertise this prior to the next meeting or be prepared to advertise at the next meeting? Go ahead, Brooke.
Let me suggest a revision. Are we prepared to identify what seats we want to define? Do people feel ready to do that? Affordable Housing Trust, Finance Committee? Do we need anything else?
CBA was one.
Yeah, and there was some discussion about whether that's necessary or not, or whether they could be brought in also.
Go ahead, Penny.
Yeah, I just feel very strongly the assigned seats should have something to do with specifically the affordable housing sector. I'm fine if it's only four assigned seats out of 11. I have no issue with that, but I think there needs to be cause and effect here.
Okay, so who, Penny?
Well,
Just two are other affordable housing.
How about Habitat? How about the Housing Authority? How about Housing Nantucket?
But all
Do we
could be
designate?
all could be at large applicants.
Right.
Do you designate a what's the term? Forgive me.
Ad
Like
hoc?
a bonus credit if you're coming from a housing stakeholders background?
You mean when we select the membership of this committee?
Right.
I think we're still talking about that. I mean, if I'm asked to select members for this committee, I'm just going to look at who I think has some experience and understanding of the affordable housing challenges here, and whether they'll be able to make the time commitment to it, and that they're not that they're able to collaborate and think independently. I guess those would be my criteria.
Like in thinking
Penny-
about, great applicants and opportunities, I think about the local, the spectrum of local lawyers who are working through real estate closings here and finding all of these restrictions. Like that's a seat that I hope gets filled by someone in that position. So there's a number of opportunities. Brooke, coming back to you.
So the question for the motion is, in order to advertise this, we need to decide whether there are designated seats that we want to say someone from Housing Nantucket and a real estate attorney, that they're predefined and that somebody has to meet that criteria to be appointed. That's all. I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is to continue to move this forward. How do we define that today? Or do we leave it that we have in our heads the idea of the type of representation we need, expertise, and then, so let me be clearer. I could make a motion that says there are 11 seats, one of which is for someone from the Affordable Housing Trust, one is for someone from the Finance Committee, one is someone from a housing nonprofit that creates units, and one is a local real estate attorney. And then we would have to appoint people that fit into those definitions. The alternative is to say, we are looking to have, when we advertise, we're looking to have representation from these types of groups, but all the seats are at large outside of FinCom and Affordable Housing Trust. And then we see who applies and try to seat people who meet those groups. So do we designate seats, or do we just encourage people to apply who represent those groups?
Thank you,
Does that
Brooke.
make
Penny,
sense to you guys?
it makes,
Yeah,
for me,
or-
it does.
To me, it makes sense to do sort of a hybrid of that, applying the latter part of what you just said to the at-large seats and having a certain number of prescribed designated seats.
So help me, I want to make the motion. So who do you imagine should be how do we designate the seat?
I was comfortable with the four you just announced.
Okay,
And I think
Before you
4 out
make
of
your
11 is certainly in a minority.
Hang on one second, Brooke. Let me come to Tucker. I think he has some input.
Well, so Brooke, can you reiterate your 4 first?
yes. A member of the Affordable Housing Trust, a member of the Finance Committee, a representative from a housing nonprofit that is creating units, and a local real estate attorney.
Creating and managing.
How about just a local housing nonprofit?
Thank you.
So looking at the folks on the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee, we had a designee from town administration / finance who was Brian Turbot. We probably want to have somebody like that on this group.
How about that instead of someone from FinCom?
I think it's 2 different things. If we have an 11-member group and we're talking about designating 5, that leaves 6 completely at-large members, which would be the majority.
Was Brian was finance a voting member? Or
I think technically he was.
does he need to be here?
He was, but could I please suggest that there is also, when we get into the details, a minimum attendance requirement?
I would prefer that the group call the finance department in for advice as needed.
I think this is an important topic that our finance director, it's going to be very important he understands this for his work with bond counsel. So I'm going to say, I think it's important he's on this group.
Vicky?
If I could make a suggestion as an outsider from your board, you may want to talk to Brian about it and just see if he would, if you want to appoint him, or save a seat for him, does he want to be on this or feel that he should be? I know he is incredibly busy and I don't know how restricted he is with time. And if you save a seat for him and then he just feels like he can't take it on. But I think you should maybe just discuss it with him and just get a sense from him as to whether he feels it would be good for him to participate. As Tucker said, he's really, he works a lot with bond counsel on funding these and funding all of these articles. So I think it's important to talk to him.
Well, Brian and I are
hate
going
to see him left out of the conversation.
we're gonna meet with him. So I agree, Vicky, like to at least offer the opportunity. I think it's an appropriate thing.
Penny?
Just quickly, another suggestion, which is the finance department could be represented by an ex officio position on this board.
I think that makes, as an advisory position, makes a lot of sense as kind of a non-voting concept to be able to. All right, Brooke, I'm coming back to you.
So I'm starting to wonder whether I'm rushing things here and that we should just put this off until our June 13th meeting. And based on Vicky's advice that we likely won't necessarily have to do home rule petitions on a lot of this, but that we work on a home rule petition for the year. The one that we don't have is it anywhere is the year-round restriction that has no income limit. And that's the one that I understand we really need to do a home rule petition. And that's that we're, the guidance is we just follow what P-Town has done. So we're all consistent. And then we refine it later at a local level, but it gets us, right? Is that right? it creates it broadly and then we're allowed to refine it locally, right?
Go back. So, if I may.
Go ahead, Vicky.
You may go back and amend the petition. So you'd have to file, but you'd have to file an amendment to it. So, you know, it takes time. Unfortunately, it takes time. So if you may want to think about what you want to put in this home rule petition, I guess is what I'm saying, without having to go back and change it. Unless you see in a couple of years that you need to go back and refine it based upon how things are proceeding with it, and how the process is working. There is a framework out there right now already. So I'm happy to share with you what I've drafted already so you can see that. And it gives you some ideas of what's already out there.
So, Brooke, if I could encourage you to reconsider your motion that we empower Tucker to find contract services, that we can understand a timeline and scope as recommended as far as a start date with a contract servicer. So we can come back to the next scheduled meeting that we can have it on the agenda with a scope of work, a recommendation on a timeline, and in that time period, give some consideration to the discussion we had as far as any regular seated members. Hopefully with this discussion here, it's more into the public and we'll hear some feedback from the public, but at least we're able to move forward with, if we find the right contract servicer, they might not be able to start till August. So let's start, if we can start with that. That's my.
Okay. Yeah. So with Penny's permission, I'm going to withdraw my motion and I'm going to replace it with a motion to authorize Tucker to find well, he's already authorized to spend certain amounts of money anyway for consultants, but let's just take a vote to find a subject matter expert to guide the deed restriction work group once we finally formulate it.
Great. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Penny. By roll call, Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Penny, Di,
Aye.
Meg Bowers,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Reba Sherry,
Aye.
and Chantal Murphy.
Aye.
Brian Sullivan's an aye. So I thank you for the full discussion. I think that we can move this forward. We're looking to 11 seats. We can work on a scope of work to identify for our future meeting and hopefully have a timeline with a contractor to work with. All right. Excellent. Where did I lose my agenda?
Other business.
Other business. Is there any other business? Penny.
Yeah, I'm just, if somebody could please tell me and everybody, what's the deadline on the RFP for Orange Street?
What? In terms, well, there is a site visit next Wednesday for parties that are interested in potentially putting in a proposal. And I will I'll dig it up here, Penny, and let you know the exact date. I believe it's due in August, but I want to get you the exact date.
That's not the registration. That's your actual
Submission.
proposal,
deadline.
right?
Are you
What's
talking about
the
the registration deadline? Or
What's the registration deadline?
I believe that it's toward the end of June, but I'm gonna have to double check that on the actual.
Okay, maybe at the next meeting, you could put that on the agenda and you can tell us.
Sure, yep.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I'm just on the procurement website right now looking.
Yeah, let me know if you get it, Brian. One thing to mention under other business is, on the agenda, our next, call it regularly scheduled meeting is June 13th, but we do have the special meeting, just as a reminder, on Tuesday at 1 to go through the closing cost assistance applications, as well as the executive session minute approval.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, a lot of hands I was reading. Brooke, Penny, Vicky, Rima. Go ahead, Brooke. Yes, Tucker.
Someone else have it open. The closing date is 8/23/23 at 3 p.m. There's a
Thank you.
pre-bid meeting. There was a pre-bid meeting. And then to register as a potential respondent and obtain the documents, please register on the bid posting. And then it says all inquiries should be made via email and directed to procurement no later than 1 p.m. on July 26th. Interested proposers are strongly encouraged to attend an on-site briefing session May 31st at 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. And registration to attend the briefing is required no later than 1 p.m. on May 20, well, yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay, Penny.
Yeah. I think we forgot to discuss and vote on the subordination
Yes.
Thank
that's
you.
what I was
of
gonna say.
29 and a half Essex Road. So
Thank
I'd
you,
like
Penny.
to suggest we go backwards.
Okay, I'll take that. Tucker, is that why your hand was up?
That's why.
And Rima, your hand was up for the same reason?
Yeah.
And Vicky, thank you guys for keeping me on track. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, and board members, yeah, this is, just a straightforward subordination. A closing cost assistant recipient is going through a refinance, no cash coming out. And so, we're just approving our continued subordination to the senior lender. And Attorney Marsh is here if there are any technical questions.
Are there any technical questions? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion.
Move approval.
Second. That was a question. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Dave. Vote by roll call. Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Penny Dye.
Aye.
Meg Browers. I think I heard aye. I got a head
Hi,
shake.
sorry, I froze.
There we go. Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Chantal Murphy,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's an aye. Okay. Did I miss anything else on the agenda? Now on item 11, executive session. I'm looking for a motion. Go ahead, Tucker.
Well, so that was originally a placeholder for the item that we now need to take up on Tuesday. I'm not aware of a specific item that we need to discuss today in executive session, unless there's something on your plate, Mr. Chair.
There is not. Great. So we'll move past item 11. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
I heard Penny move the motion to adjourn and a second from
Second.
Chantal by roll call. Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Penny Dye,
aye.
Mike Browers,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Chantal Murphy,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's and I. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.